A Look at Finance is underwritten by Janney Montgomery Scott, trusted advisors for generations.
Welcome back, everyone. Well, it's Thursday, so Steph Carlton is here to talk about all things related to the world of finance. Now, each week, as you know, we try to tackle a couple of the larger issues, and especially how they, affect our area in Saratoga, Warren, and Washington County. But, Steph, I got news for you. There's so much going on globally that has to affect everybody that lives in this country. I don't care if you're in the Northeast or wherever you are. And, we always make the point that things that are going on globally do actually come down. They affect our stock market, they affect our interest rates, they affect a lot of things in the decisions that you're making every day for your clients. Okay, big intro. Globally, let's talk about a couple of things that are going on.
Okay.
Sanctions in Russia. How does that affect us?
You know, this is a bold move. Europe and the U.S. put a bunch of sanctions on Russia because of what was happening in Ukraine, and they never really expected or planned for, it seemed, that Russia would fire sanctions back. And so there's this big response from Europe and the U.S. saying, wait a minute, you're going to put sanctions on us? And Vladimir Putin came back and said, yeah, I'm going to block food imports, and I'm going to cut back on a various list of things. And it caused a little bit of nervousness and panic today because countries like Greece, countries like Italy, Germany, and France, who export their food to Germany,
to Russia.
To Russia, thank you. Their economies are already struggling kind of on the ropes to begin with.
Right.
And so this cutback from Russia's side really could be threatening to them. And so a bit of a reaction on that side.
But you know what? Now I've heard, we're in media, right? So if it's a story, and I think it was something that, Russia imported a gazillion chickens or something, they didn't have enough poultry there. But even the sanctions that they're weighing in, it makes big news and makes, a lot of noise, but it only represents something like 1 or 2%.
Yeah, it's not as big of effect as the market reacts sometimes. And sometimes you have a movement that is a very minimal effect, maybe even a rounding error, but you see a 5 or 6 or 10% correction, and that's the knee-jerk reaction. So companies like Pepsi and Coke and McDonald's and those types of companies that have exposure to Russia, the measured effect that this will have is hard to really extrapolate at this point. There's not real clear how deep and how broad and how long this will be. So I think as an investor, you have to kind of take a look at it and say, okay, how much does this actually affect the bottom line?
Gotcha.
And with a lot of these feed things, like you said, with chicken and wheat and everything else we transport over there, how much of it is going to affect the U.S. market?
I got you. No, you can't live a day without recognizing what's going on in the Middle East.
Oh my goodness!
Things like even like the what's going on in Syria takes a backseat to what's going on in Ukraine, which is now taking a backseat to what's going on in the Middle East. The biggest one, of course, Israel and Hamas and the Gaza Strip. There's a lot going on in Iraq with ISIS. I was watching something last night that suggested that these are all separate countries now, but not too long ago it was all part of one big Ottoman Empire. Are we going back to that? That's got to send a lot of shockwaves into the market.
You're right when you talk about historically. These are nomadic cultures. And so Persia, the Ottoman Empire, these nations were not defined the way the England did back in World War I. I mean, those boundary lines were not drawn by these cultures. And so it is interesting because you're right. Palestine and Israel, that dominated the media last week. But ISIS has been quietly building a bigger and bigger threat. Tens of thousands of people killed there. Palestine was an issue. But the bigger issue, I think, in many respects, is this powder keg in Iraq. I mean, ISIS going after the dam in Iraq that threatens possibly millions of people. Now the talk today about possibly having targeted strikes by the U.S. To try to get aid over there. That, I think, is the bigger story when you look at the Middle East. But it's been kind of percolating. It's been kind of off to the side quietly because people really weren't talking about it. But I think that's the big story. And when I think about oil prices and I think about Middle Eastern security, that story's been going on for a long, long time. This is the more compelling story, I think.
Right. Now, of course, this is all global news, all world news. How does this relate to people in Saratoga, Warren, and Washington County? Well, like we're saying, it affects people's portfolio. It affects their retirement. The question that I always want to ask you is that on a weekly basis, understanding all of the things that we're talking about, is there a common thread in the phone calls that you receive as an advisor from people living in our community is there a common thread?
Yeah, there are themes. So you're right. I think the big thing that people are really surprised at is everybody was told to get out of bonds back last year, October, November. Everybody knew you had to be in the stock market. You didn't want to be in bonds because bond interest rates were going to skyrocket. Well, actually, the opposite has happened. Interest rates have gone down. And so people in the last week or two said, Steve, wait a minute. I keep seeing the 10-year interest rate dropping. It's below 2.5%. It looks like it's going to go lower. What does that mean for bonds? What does that mean for income? I notice my bonds are going up in value, and the stock market's selling off. There seems to be a lot of volatility on the equity side and a lot of price appreciation on the bond side, excluding high-yield bonds. And so the big thing is for a lot of retirees, a lot of people getting closer to retirement, is to say, wait a minute, is this good news for us? And it is good news. Right. It is very good news.
Well, you know what you like to say. So if I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but people want to know more about risk.
Right, sure, risk is huge.
Okay, and they want to know more about income. How do these fluctuations affect my income? And obviously the bonds being, in theory, a more secure, long-term kind of investment, less volatile investment than the stock market, right?
There's a word, the volatility.
Right.
That's a reoccurring theme for us
for
over the years. And it's been kind of quiet the last couple of years. People have been kind of lulled because the stock market was going up quarter after quarter.
Right.
Now that volatility question, that's another big one that's coming back on the table. And I say to people, volatility isn't a bad thing. That's market opportunity.
For buying and selling.
Yeah,
sure,
so these movements of the stock market up and down, if you're actively managing your money and you have a financial advisor that's actively involved, engaged in the market, and you're not buying and holding just 5 or 6 securities, there's the opportunity. The opportunity to say, wait a minute, this sold off in this segment of the market, maybe the German stock market sold off, this week.
Right.
Where's the opportunity there? And so that volatility creates opportunity. And that's
one thing that you said a couple of weeks ago, and you wouldn't think of it this way, but again, that's why you're the expert, is if everybody's running from something, don't run with them, stop for a second and take a look at what they're running from.
Yeah.
I remember you saying that to me, and I thought, boy, that sure makes sense, because there may be an opportunity there.
I saw, I think of Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett, the oracle of all.
Sure.
I think he's the kind of person that if a building is, people are yelling fire and they're running out of the building and there's only smoke, I think he kind of takes a look in and says, wait a minute, how bad is it? And so he's picked up some great companies over the last 20, 30 years because people are running away from them. And I think some of this volatility where people are running away, that's the opportunity to say, if you believe in the adage of buying low and selling high, let's take a look at those things. So this is an interesting time where the S&P is down around 1909 today, 0.5% correction or more. Now's the time, I think, to start taking a look and say, okay, we've had a pullback. Is there any opportunities to take advantage of?
One thing, just want to cycle back for a second. Everybody always talks about the stock market and whatever. You always talk about the S&P. That selected group of 500 diverse companies, how they're performing or not performing is really a major gauge for you, right?
Yeah, the Dow 30 is the one that everybody talks about. The Dow's at 17.3. Today the Dow's at 16.3.
Right.
That's 30 stocks. I kind of like to look at 2 broader indexes. And the broader indexes that I look at is the S&P 500, those big, large companies that, those names you're all going to recognize. And then the Russell 2000. The Russell 2000 is in 2,000 companies, broad, diverse. And I think those indexes help us get a better sense of how things are moving. When I look at moving averages and those kinds of things. But I think that's sometimes a better barometer.
Well, you know what? If you're looking at 2,000 companies a day, you've got a pretty busy day.
You go cross-eyed some days.
So do you get any time to go to any of the fundraisers going on in Saratoga?
Oh my goodness! Is
there one a night? At least one a night.
There is sometimes 2. The last I was talking with somebody this morning, and this gentleman mentioned that he'd gone to 10 events in the last 10 days. And he, talking about not unshaven and kind of looking a little haggard. But we've talked a lot about this. This is a community that gives.
Yes, very much so.
Far beyond, the size is sometimes deceptive. I mean, when we look at the size of this community, we give an awful lot. And I've been so impressed seeing this year all the different organizations, all the different charities, and hitting their goals and having people turn out and the generosity. So, I look at it, and having gone a lot of them this summer, I'm just continually amazed to see people opening up their checkbook and saying, yeah, I'd like to support this.
Well, they sure do. We do a lot of interviews here, and all of the organizations are so diverse, they're so interesting, they all have wonderful causes, and they're all drawing crowds they're all making money.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Well, this will probably keep building until Travers, and after Travers, it'll probably then just start to
I was
slide off a
little bit. Yeah, but we'll be exhausted by then, I'm sure. But it's you got to come to some of these with me again, like we did last year. It'll be fun.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
Well, good, Steve. Thanks.
Thanks,
and next week we'll hit it again.
Looking forward to it.
Okay, good. Thank
Take
you.
care.
See this interview again. Head to our website, looktvonline.com.